The Lefty's Deceiver is one of the most recognizable patterns in the world. It only requires 4 or 5 materials that are readily available and is fairly simple to construct once you get the hang of manipulating the materials. The fly is more a style than a specific pattern, as you can substitute a wide variety of materials to use in the tying and vary the colors to almost any imaginable combination. The version I am tying is more to the traditional pattern, as it was developed in the 1950s by Lefty Kreh. This pattern has an additional step which incorporates a bucktail lateral line in the body of the fly. It uses the peacock herl topping and red gills, which are often omitted by modern tyers. The fly has the taper of a baitfish with lots of movement when stripped through the water. The first step to the fly is to make a tail using 4 feathers from a saddle. They can be any color or type that you like. I often match the overall fly using white or olive grizzly hackles. You can use any cape feather, but I prefer to always take it directly off the skin. I avoid strung saddles as they tend to be too twisted and roughed up to offer a good wing. You want to choose a neck that has straight feathers and not folded or bent. Choose feathers from the same general areas of the neck. 2 from the left side and 2 from the right side. Take the 2 feathers from the left side and put them together. They should be relatively the same size and width. Match the direction of the curvature of the feather and align the tips. When you hold them together, they should look like one feather. Repeat this step with the feathers selected from the right side. Now, take both sides of the feathers and put them together with the curved sides pushing into each other, like your hands in prayer. Match the tips of the feathers and carefully stroke them from the base to the tip. This will bring them together and align all the feathers into one. Carefully remove the fuzz from the base of the feathers to leave the stems clean of any fluff or barbules. The wing is now complete. Set the wing aside and tie the thread on the hook shank. The thread should be at the point of the hook. Line up the stems of the feathers so they lay flat, side by side, in the order of their position. The stems should not crisscross over each other. Using loose wraps, tie the feathers to the top of the shank, keeping them straight and in line with each other. Check the position of the wing. It should be in line with the hook shank and in a straight line, not curved to one side or the other. Rotate the hook and make sure everything is aligned before tying down the feather with tight wraps. If everything is aligned and straight, wind back to the rear of the hook with firm wraps. As you get close to the tail, loosen up on the pressure so you don't disturb the position and alignment of the feathers. The next step is optional. You can take a piece of flat silver tinsel and tie it on at the base of the tail. Wind the thread forward to the eye of the hook. Leave enough room to tie the belly and wing, about 1/4 inch behind the hook eye. Wrap the tinsel forward to the thread in closed wraps. When wrapping the tinsel, use firm wraps to make sure the body does not slip or unravel. When you reach the thread, tie off the tinsel and remove the excess. Now we will tie in the belly. Select a bucktail with fine hair to help manage the spinning or wild untamed look. Select a sparse bunch of hair from the tip of the bucktail, usually the finest hair. Align the tips by hand, then use a hair stacker to further align the tips. They don't have to be perfect, but it helps in eliminating hairs of unequal or shorter lengths. When stacked, remove the hair and hold it up to the fly. You want the tips to face to the rear of the fly and they should reach halfway down the tail. I find it easier to rotate the vise head and tie it down with the fly upside down. Trim the butt ends and tie in on the bottom of the hook. Divide the hair into two sides and place over the hook bend. Divide the tips evenly to each side of the hook. Tie it down to the shank. Make a couple loose wraps to bring the hair into place, then bind the hair down with firm wraps to hold everything in place. As you work to the tips of the hair, use a looser wrap so the hair does not flare. You can flatten down the bucktail and make sure it is evenly spread 180 degrees around the hook. Again, using a lot of pressure near the eye of the book and use less tension as you get toward the rear of the tie-down point. You now have the belly tied in around the sides and bottom. You should be able to see the tinsel when looking down from the top. Grab a few strands of flashabou and tie half of it on one side of the hook, on top and along the feather, and then half on the other side in the same manner. It should lie on top of the white bucktail. The next step is an optional lateral line to add a little more dimension to the pattern. Take a sparse amount of pink bucktail, about the same length as the white, and tie in the same manner, evenly divided between the tail and laying on top of the white bucktail. Again, align the tips and use a stacker to fine-tune them. Split the bucktail in half and tie equally on each side of the fly. The tie-in point will be slightly back from the white. This is so you can create a taper in the head. Don't worry about bulk, you want to build a large enough head to create a base for the eyes to be placed. The top should be a little sparser than the belly and slightly longer in length. It will be tied directly on top of the hook. Again, the tie-in point should be slightly back from the pink to continue the taper. Tie the hair slightly back from the previous hair. Again, using tight firm wraps in the front and less pressure as you get to the point where the hair exits the thread wraps. Before wrapping in the hair, take a look at its position and make sure it is straight and on top of the fly. Increase the head size to make a good base to support the eyes. The topping is an optional step. It was incorporated in the original pattern, but it is often omitted by modern tyers. Peacock curl takes on a bronze color in the water and adds a nice dimension to the fly. I love the look it has on the finished fly, so I use it in my deceiver patterns. It should measure longer than the top wing and is tied in directly behind the eye of the hook. This also helps to smooth out the taper as formed by layering the bucktail as tied in. Rotate the fly so the belly is facing up. To finish the fly, we will tie a beard that will represent gills. Originally, this was red flashabou. Here I am using red EP fibers tied on the bottom of the fly, then cut to the length of the hook point. Once you get the beard in place, finish the head, now making sure you have enough bulk to place the eyes on each side. When you have everything covered and the bulk is satisfactory, whip finish the fly and remove the thread. The tying is now complete. Trim the beard so the fibers go to the hook point. You can use a bodkin or scissors to curl the peacock curl into the wing. The final step is to affix the eyes to the fly. First, take a drop of Zap-A-Gap or superglue and apply it to each side of the head. Take a flat prismatic eye and lay it on the glue. This will securely hold everything in place so you can then cover the entire head with epoxy. Carefully, place one eye on each side of the head, making sure they are straight and evenly positioned. When both eyes are set and the glue is dry, use epoxy to lock them in place and give the head a finished look. I use Solarez hard, thin formula. I apply a thin layer of epoxy around the entire head, encapsulating the eyes. Then I give a quick swipe of the light to set the epoxy, then I hold the light toddy head for 15 seconds to cure it. Passing the light is important before holding the light to the head as it prevents the epoxy from getting too hot and burning. If it burns, it will remain tacky and not fully cure. I then apply a second coat to the head and repeat the light. The fly is now complete and ready to catch fish.